We open on a springtime field in northern France. The camera pulls back to reveal a rather painterly composition of two British soldiers dozing while all is quiet on the Western Front. This respite is short-lived as a sergeant interrupts the tranquil moment, literally kickstarting the events of a film that transpire in real time. This is the opening shot of Sam Mendes' 1917, and this is Open and Close, a series where I explore the opening and closing scenes of a given film to study how the filmmakers bring us into the story, and ultimately, what they leave us with. While the beginning and ending are the focal points, everything is on the table. There will be spoilers, so please see 1917 for yourself before watching this video. And so it begins. Now, when I said this was the opening shot of the film, that was putting it very, very lightly. Indeed, one can scarcely analyze 1917, let alone talk about 1917, without addressing the film's stalwart cinematography, spearheaded by the great Roger Deakins. And one can scarcely address the cinematography of 1917 without remarking on its semblance of unfolding in a single long take as a quote-unquote one-shot film. That said, 1917 is not a one-shot film, as a particular cut to black 2/3 of the way through makes explicitly clear. But even without that blackout, it wouldn't be a true one-shot film, as 1917 is actually composed of dozens of shots stitched together to merely appear as two long takes. One of my favorite aspects of 1917 is the simplistic and straightforwardness of its narrative.
Blake.
Sorry, Sarge.
Pick a man. Bring your kit.
Yes, Sarge.
Right out of the gate, not only are we introduced to our main characters, but we know their orders. Thomas Blake, played by Jean Charles Chapman, enlists fellow Lance Corporal William Schofield, played by George McKay, for whatever presumably trivial chore lays in store. The pair chit-chat about food and word from the home front as they muddy their way toward the comms trench. If you're anything like me, by this point you're somewhat preoccupied with observing and appreciating the background, namely the impressive fusion of extras and production design. Dozens of characters doing dozens of things as the protagonists stroll on by. It's this level of sideline detail that really goes a long way in creating a living, breathing world as a backdrop to the story. Soldiers need to get their hair cut, they need to have their clothes washed, and 100 other things. As a period piece of a specific time and place, it's impressive in the least, and given the subject matter, an artistic act of devotion. This stuff is easy to take for granted, after all it often falls to the background, but I find this a good metric for the level of passion and care put into a production, and a fitting reminder here that it takes an army to pull off a project of this scope and size. This world building is on display throughout 1917. Now, let's return to the foreground where Blake and Schofield's conversation takes a turn for the serious. Notice how this heavy topic is breached as the pair enter the trench, something made explicit on the page of Mendes and co-writer Christy Wilson Cairns' screenplay.
Tastes like old shit.
Cheer up. This time next week it'll be chicken dinner.
The trench drops deeper into the earth.
Not me. My leave got cancelled.
They say why?
No idea.
A beat. The world above has now disappeared.
It's easier not to go back at all.
It's a dark line, but he means it. Flash forward a half hour when the two are well on their way in carrying out their orders. This topic comes up again when Blake is taking Schofield to task for trading away his medal for a bottle of wine.
If I got a medal, I'd take it back home. Why didn't you just take it home?
Look, it's just a bit of bloody tin. It doesn't make you special. It doesn't make any difference to anyone.
Yes, it does.
I hated going home. I hated it. When I knew I couldn't stay. When I knew I had to leave, and they might never see me.
For able-bodied soldiers, as long as there is a war, home is but a memory, a hiatus at best. I consider this to be the underlying theme of 1917. It's punctuated by each instance of rest being interrupted by the call of duty. Indeed, this is how the film begins, and, well, we'll soon explore how and where it ends. Their talk of home comes to an end as they descend into the trench, and they notice that something's up. And the music picks up.
Something's up. Did you hear anything?
No.
The pair begin to navigate their way through the serpentine network of the rear trench, and it's here that the camera work really starts to stretch its legs. It pivots just as the soldiers report to the sergeant and begins to follow our protagonists. This perspective shift here almost mimics the moment when a third-person video game transitions from cutscene to gameplay, the moment when such games ostensibly shift from an animated film to an interactive simulation. Indeed, 1917 bears several earmarks of the video game medium, which I'm probably the millionth person to point out, but that's largely a symptom of its aforementioned conceit, and the fact that large swaths of its audience are well versed in that very presentation, myself included. This is actually a topic I'm really interested in and have a lot more to say on the subject, but in the interest of focusing on the opening and closing scenes, I'd better move on. The shift from our characters walking towards camera to camera following characters is also a moment to appreciate the oft unsung camera crew. It reminds me of the Frank and Ernest cartoon, where the duo, seemingly in line for a Fred Astaire festival, is told by a woman, "Sure, he was great, but don't forget that Ginger Rogers did everything he did, backwards and in high heels." And so, to pull off such shots, the camera operator has to cover the same terrain, backwards and holding a camera. I'm not suggesting Deakins wore high heels on the shoot, but if he did, more power to him. After zigzagging through the trenches, Blake and Schofield are led to the dark, yawning mouth of a dugout, where they're informed that the general awaits inside. They enter the dugout, and I'd presume they hit a cut here, as doorways are popular places to make scenes seem seamless, and having completed their initial order, they are tasked with one far greater, directly from the general, no less. Blake and Schofield and the audience are filled in on the situation via a rather terse exposition dump, keeping in line with the forthrightness of 1917's plot.
Your orders are to get to the second at Quasi Wood, 1 mile southeast of the town of Lacust. Deliver this to Colonel Mackenzie. It is a direct order to call off tomorrow morning's attack.
It boils down to basic yet reliable storytelling fundamentals, providing the characters with a clear intention, which will inevitably be littered with obstacles. To increase the potency, make the stakes as high as they can possibly be.
If you don't, it will be a massacre. We will lose 2 battalions, 1,600 men, your brother among them.
They have a destination, they have a deadline, and it's entirely up to the two of them.
Is it just us?
Down to Gehenna or up to the throne. He travels the fastest who travels alone.
That's a line from Rudyard Kipling's The Winners, by the way, and a very British alternative to just saying yes. And if the dialogue and performances weren't enough to clue us into the gravity of what the soldiers have been tasked with, Thomas Newman's brooding ambient score fills the rest of the dingy dugout. The serenity on display just minutes before now feels like a distant memory, and home seems that much further still. They are filled in, they are sent out, and they're off.
Blake, let's talk about this for a minute.
Why?
Despite the artifice of a single shot, I'd say we're well past what constitutes an opening scene at this point, so let's turn our attention to the film's closing. After trekking across no man's land, surviving a tripwire in the vacated German barracks, coming across an abandoned farmhouse where the pair rescued a German pilot from a burning plane, who repaid their mercy by fatally stabbing Blake, Schofield comforts his companion as life drains away. He's picked up by a passing British convoy before setting out on his own for the front line. He's knocked out in a firefight, only to come to in the dark of night. Or is it morning? Pursued by German soldiers, he makes a daring escape, coming ashore near the D Company of the 2nd Devons, who are beginning their charge. Desperate to reach Colonel Mackenzie, Schofield runs along the battlefield, having to dodge his fellow soldiers whose lives he is trying to save. At last, he delivers the message, and Mackenzie begrudgingly calls off the attack. Orders finally fulfilled, there's a personal matter to attend to. Schofield sets out to the casualty clearing station behind the line to find Blake's brother, and when he finally does...
You must know my brother.
I was sent here with him.
Tom's here. Where is he?
It was very quick.
Schofield hands Lieutenant Blake his brother's personal effects, and there will surely be a well-deserved medal for him after all.
You should have taken it home with you. You should have given it to your family. Men have died for that.
Having accomplished all that he set out to do, Schofield meanders away from the aid post and makes for the lone tree at the edge of the meadow. He rests against it and reveals some personal effects of his own, photographs of his daughters and wife. A simple plea scrawled on the other side, "Come back to us." He reached his destination today, but returning home and staying home is the ultimate finish line. Whether or not he gets there is left for the viewer to surmise. As he holds the photographs, it's hard to ignore his bandaged hand, ripped open the day before when crossing no man's land and put right through a rat-infested corpse. That happens early in the film, and on my initial viewing, I thought to myself, yeah, he's a goner. And then again in the German barracks, and yet it's Schofield who miraculously survived. 1917's opening and closing shots bear obvious symmetry. A soldier resting against old but strong living trees to bookend an eventful day. Lights at either end of a dark tunnel. I am reminded of a moment from the second book in Eiji Yoshikawa's Musashi, when the titular Ronin enters the Yagyu Valley. He is amazed by what he sees and tells his young disciple Jotaro, all the trees in Yagyu are old. That means there haven't been any wars here. No enemy troops burning or cutting down the forests. Similarly, trees mark the fringes of war in 1917. Trees blown down to their trunks across no man's land. This specimen seen after they emerge from what may have very well become their tomb, miraculously still standing, though completely naked. It watches them like a sentinel on a hill as they pass through a shell-strewn grove. They happen upon what was once a cherry orchard, now a cherry cemetery, a sign of destruction left in the enemy's wake, trees cut at the knees to hinder their passage on roads. It is the petals of the cherry blossoms that reignite the fire in Schofield when it has all but gone out, leading him to the wood and the company he seeks, until he finally finds rest. He closes his eyes and feels the sun on his face. A more sadistic filmmaker might have ended with another sergeant entering the frame and kicking him to attention, highlighting the vicious cyclical nature of war. But Mendes, the classy Brit that he is, cuts to black and dedicates the film to his grandfather, who told us the stories. Yes, 1917 is simplistic, straightforward, and even blunt, but its exquisite execution, evident in the way it gingerly blossoms and gracefully wilts, makes it worthy of that dedicatory final note. And so we fade out on this installment of Open and Close. I'd love to hear your thoughts on 1917's opening and closing scenes and the themes it explores. Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you down there. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe to Cineflect for more Open and Close, and click that bell next to the subscribe button if you'd like to be notified anytime I upload a new video. For Cineflect, I'm J.S. Lewis. Until next time, watch something good.